Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
They actually ended up turning pretty much the whole grade against me. So they had this thing where I just remember this. I'm like, Jesus, kids are evil. Where they had this thing where they would roll up their sleeves, and that was like a symbol for disliking me. And so the whole grade, well, not the whole grade, but a lot of the people in grade, like, because it became this thing where you didn't want to be the guy that didn't have your sleeves rolled up.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joining today, he's the CEO and founder of Atkins Health. It's Tobias Atkins. How you doing today, Tobias?
Really good. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me, mate. Looking forward to the chat.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Yeah, nice one, man. So I guess I grew up in north of Brisbane. Brisbane, for those of you who don't know, is in Queensland in Australia. So grew up, basically born and bred in Brisbane in Queensland. Mate, that's kind of, I guess, where it all started for me. Family of five, older sister, younger brother.
What was specifically like is special about where you grew up? Was there anything like a certain activity that you did, something that maybe people that are listening to this internationally don't know anything about?
Yeah, cool. So I love sport, and I'm sure that will come through into my career choice and things like that I'm sure we'll get to talking about. But so started off like most young guys, got myself into soccer, and was playing that, but soon moved over to a sport that probably isn't super well recognized around the world, but it's AFL, so Australian Football League. Kind of grew up recognizing it and knowing it because dad was really big into it in his younger years. So that's, I guess, a direction that I started to head down and got really involved in that and started to try and push myself into representative sides. And I guess that would probably be the most interesting part of my younger years, I guess, when it comes to hobbies as such.
You talked about AFL. Here in states where I'm at, you usually won't see it until it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's, I think I found out about it a few years ago, and I was obsessed with it because I thought something that we don't get to see here. Usually it's more rugby than Australian football. So you guys definitely have the two, but you talked about soccer and then making that transition to AFL. There is a little similarity because it's more focusing on kicking and more running and endurance compared to going from soccer to like you're tackling people, because AFL there's not much tackling at all. But how was that transition? Did you find it being comfortable, or was it really a challenge going between the two?
Yeah, great question. Firstly, I'm impressed that you guys even show it. I didn't actually know that at all. So that's super cool. Oftentimes when I talk to people in other countries, they don't even know that it existed for the first place. So that's really sweet. I guess it was really young. So when I made the transition, I was about 11 years old. So 11 under 11s was my first year playing AFL. For those of you who don't know the sport, it is definitely primarily the use of your feet, but certainly catching or what we call in the sport marking. I don't know why it's quite an unusual kind of terminology, so I guess kicking, kind of like what you would see, I guess, in rugby. Like holding the ball in the hands and then kicking it out of your hands, like punting, I guess, in the NFL. Actually, a lot of really good like kickers in AFL actually get poached to play in NFL
Oh,
as
wow.
punters, which is an interesting construct. A lot of tackling actually is involved, particularly in the younger years in AFL, because I guess one thing to know is that when you mark the ball, so say someone kicks it, the other person catches it on the full, so without it bouncing, that is what we call a mark. And at that point in time, you're not allowed to tackle the person who caught the ball. That
Okay.
person then it turns around and has a chance, basically at 15 seconds, to kick the ball without being interrupted. So in the professional leagues, as you would have experienced when watching it, Alex, there's a lot of really good pinpoint kickers and markers. So the tackling opportunities is greatly reduced. But in the younger years, in the under 12s and under 11s that we play, there's a hell of a lot more tackling because the skill set's a lot lower, right? So, yeah, so far more physical than soccer, but to be completely frank, it really kind of suited my style. So the transition for me was actually very welcomed. I'm not the most skillful of athletes. I guess I'm a little bit more determined. So what gets me places, I guess, playing sport is more my determination and my willingness to kind of push through. So yeah, the transition for me was cool. It happened at a time where my best mate who I was playing soccer with and the coach at soccer left. So it made for a really good time for me to make the change.
When you were playing AFL, was it ever feeling like an escape? Like when you're out on the field, you're like at home. Like if there was
Mm.
anything with school or with interactions with other kids, did it kind of feel like a safety place for you?
It's a really interesting question. I've never been asked before. I really like that, and I guess the answer to that would be maybe not a safety place, but a place to let out. I guess you know that inner. I don't want to call it anger because it makes it sound like I was an aggressive person or wanting to be an aggressive person, but um, yeah, I certainly felt at home on the AFL field. I really enjoyed the physical component of it, the ability to, I guess, get physical, and tackle and let that stuff out. And um, I guess that came actually into even the training. So like I was right into it. So my dad, when he was a young player, he made the Queensland AFL team, which is like your state team, was the captain of that side and was actually asked to play, be the captain of the Australian side to go and do a few tours. And at the time, back in the day, there was no money in it. So unfortunately, my dad pulled out of playing the sport and went down an unusual career in chefing, I guess. But that then led to, I guess, me and him spending a lot of time at home and training together. And it was a cool relationship. It wasn't one that you would like hear a lot where you get a lot of pressure coming from the parents and stuff like that. It was more, you know, me going to him, going, Dad, like, I really want to get stronger and you know, be more physically present on the field. And so I got a punching bag, a heavy punching bag at home. And I used to throw the punching bag and allow it to hit me. So I learned to condition my body to take hits and then be able to deliver them. So if you think about it with respect to your question around an outlet, yeah, I guess it was. And yeah, I'm not sure if we'll go into it, but I had a very fortunate upbringing, but there were certainly some challenges, you know, in school and social life that were quite challenging. So yeah, getting on the football field was certainly a way that I could, I guess, let that out, and also kind of be an element of myself.
You mentioned how like at the younger age level where kids are tackling each other when it comes to where the adults aren't doing it. I just can imagine a bunch of kids that are just wanting to sign up because they're like, oh, I get to tackle people. Like I feel like that kind of aggression is like so common with younger kids because they're like, oh, they have all this energy and stuff. And then when you just mention training is you're taking a punching bag, pushing it, and it's hitting you. I'm thinking the training for that would not be what I would expect. But I feel like that kind of activity really kind of builds you up in not just a physical way, but a mental way. It kind of makes you mentally more strong, emotionally more strong, where you're able to overcome those challenges and not be afraid of what to expect when you're out on that field. It's kind of like an unorthodox way of like building up that skill set, but I feel there's much value to that. You mentioned those challenges, the social challenges, the school challenges. Talk about a little bit about that and how that played a big effect in your life.
Yeah, so I guess it actually goes a fair while back. So I grew up in North Brisbane as I mentioned, and I just want to say like I feel like I had a phenomenal upbringing. Like honestly, like you know, looking back and hearing a lot of other people's stories around you know their family life and home life. I reflect on the life now, looking back at, I'm a 34-year-old man now, looking back at my life and the opportunities and the home life that my parents and family gave me, and I'm so grateful for it. Not just because that it was awesome, but also because we were not fortunate, financially as a family, and um, it's actually, yeah, so it's very humble beginnings when it comes to finances for my family. Like, as I mentioned, my dad was unable to follow his dreams because his family had no money, and whilst my mum's family was not quite financially distressed, they weren't incredibly well off either, and so that obviously moved through generationally to my parents. But it was interesting because I never felt that. As a kid, like I never felt that I had a longing for anything that I couldn't have. It was, and I think that really came through into my mentality even today. Like, I genuinely feel if I want something, I can get it. Like, I can work myself into a position where I can achieve it. And um, yeah, it's fascinating to see how great a job my parents did with the little they had. And their ability to kind of push that on to us as children, to think that the world is our oyster and we can achieve anything. So yeah, I guess I want to mention that, because I think that's really important. But if we talk about those challenges, I guess I was a victim of probably what you'd call pretty severe bullying, in my primary school years. So what that looked like, to cut a long story short, and I'm happy to go deeper into it if that's what you want to do. Like, I'm a pretty open book when it comes to this stuff, but going to school as a young person in grade one, which for us is our first year, for some sort of reason, there was a gentleman who was a couple of grades above me who found an interest in making my playtime, the breaks, hell. So he would come up and find me and basically say, oh, you're in trouble. The principal wants to see you. You need to go up to the office. And, being a young guy without any understanding of the way that schools work and social thing, that stressed me out. So it got to a point where, basically, like, I would go to school and enjoy class. For some, I had no problems with my friends in my class and my teacher. I was just actually afraid of what was meant to be the best times at school, which is break time. So I would go have my food, and I'd literally sit by a pole outside the classroom all through break, waiting for class to start again. And that was, I guess, my introduction to school. And yeah, I don't know if you want to unpack that before I continue on to another episode of bullying that occurred later on in my life as well. But yeah, shall I just continue through,
Yeah,
or?
keep going, keep going.
Okay. So yeah, look, I moved past that, and sport was a real help for that. When I started to get better at sport, this gentleman was up against me in the morning sport. So I was like, you know what? Like, this was in the soccer days, yeah. So I was like, I enjoy soccer. I'm all right at it. I'm gonna go, lift up. My parents, knew what was going on, but rightfully allowed me to go through that on my own. They didn't inject themselves into the schooling. They just tried to support me and give me the courage to stand up for myself. And so I did that one morning playing soccer before school, and the gentleman came and approached me, and I slide tackled him, and I guess it was a realization that he was just a boy as well, and because he was subject to that tackle, and seemed hurt, and I was like, oh, okay, this guy isn't invincible. So then it led to me kind of standing up for myself a few more times, and sure enough, after not long, after probably 9 months of this bullying occurrence, he started to lay off because I started to stand up for myself. So that's, I guess, how I got over that episode. And then for some reason, in grade five, so 5 years later, another episode occurred where, there's a couple of boys in my class who just took a liking to want to bully me. And again, a kind-hearted guy. Like, I don't fight fire with fire. And, again, it stems back from a story from my father that I can share with you in a moment. But I approached this guy again. I got fed up with it, and I was like, "Look, mate, like, if you got a problem with me, like, let's just go sort it out. And we'll meet you down in the Oval." after school, big tough guys going to have their battle it out, and yeah, we did that, and he tried to hurt me by kicking me and stuff. And to be honest, and I remember that episode vividly, and it just didn't hurt. Like there was nothing apart what he could do that physically, whether it be my adrenaline pumping at the time or whatnot. But I kind of turned around and honestly, genuinely was like, "Oh, is that it?" And at that moment, like he recognized, like, "Oh shit, like I'm not going to be able to hurt this guy." And so they backed right off, and that was the end of them. I didn't fight back. I was just like I actually said to him at the moment, I was like, mate, like I don't know why you have a problem with me. I don't actually have a problem with you, so I'm not going to hurt you. I'll defend myself, but I'm not going to hurt you. So have at it, and that's how that started. And then when he tried and was like, this isn't working, he gave up. Yeah, and then I don't know why I must have had a target on my back, but again in grade six, I was subject to another bullying episode, which was probably the worst, worst of all. And this was again the same year that I started playing AFL, so when I was 11, and I had some disagreements with people in my class, and I had this group of guys who befriended me, like, and I thought, this is great. I had my own friends, and outside of school, this was, I guess, a saving grace. Back in home, we used to play on the street all the time, and I had a great group of friendships, and I was having a great time. So I still got to develop all those good social skills and enjoyed life. It was just, these episodes that were really harmful. And this one was bad. Like, so these two guys befriended me. I thought they were my friends. And then at a point in time where, we're like, oh, well, let's hang out after school. They basically turned on me, and said that it was a strategy that whole time. They're like, mate, you don't get it. Like we've been setting you up this whole time. We actually don't like you at all. And I was like, why? Like, what's going on? And I just couldn't understand it. I couldn't grapple with it. And they actually ended up turning pretty much the whole grade against me. So they had this thing where I just remember this. I'm like, Jesus, kids are evil. Where they had this thing where they would roll up their sleeves, and that was like a symbol for disliking me. And so the whole grade, well, not the whole grade, but a lot of the people in grade, like, because it became this thing where you didn't want to be the guy that didn't have your sleeves rolled up, that they did that. And I remember like coming to school, and the teacher was had us set in groups, and I'd rock up, and my desk and chair would be separated, because one of the kids would have got there early and moved me separated from the rest of the group, and I'd move it back. And then again, that was just a repeat every day. And yeah, like I remember, like my best mate, he rolled his sleeves up, and I was like, mate, like what's going on? Like, you know what that stands for? And he's like, well, man, like if I don't do this, I'm gonna end up like you. So I'm doing this. And I was like, far out, like this is crazy. So yeah, I guess at school, like that was quite tough. Yeah, that went on. We hit summer. The next year came around, and funnily enough, I didn't buy into it. I didn't care about it. Didn't try and fit in. I just left them and did their thing. And that year was the same year I made a bit of a go of AFL. So my second year playing the sport, I made the district team, the regional team, then the state team, and got quite recognised by the school and peers for that, because that was a large achievement. No one in the school had made state sides, and I guess with sport prowess in the younger years usually comes with popularity.
Yep.
So in a very quick turnaround time, I went from the guy that everyone rolled the sleeves up saying they disliked to probably one of the most popular kids in the school.
Which is wild that
Crazy.
like
Mm,
like each year that you mention, it's like kids are finding out how to treat other kids from someone. Like
right.
it's not like a kid's gonna know like how to like behave that way, and especially the
Mm,
ones where the recent story you just shared where everyone's rolling up your sleeves. And I feel like at that time it's like for here it's kind of like the high school days. Is high school
right.
is you're trying to find that clique that kind of matches your personality, who you get along with, and then you're trying to keep that status. And you
Yeah.
mentioned how your mate was trying to not be associated with you, but real friends would stick up for each other. And it kind of, if you, at that time, you're probably thinking, was he not my friend? If he's not
Right.
willing to stick up for yourself, but it's just so the whole like popularity thing, it's just like that just sounds like high school and like college and like things like now we see a lot more with, oh, you have a certain following, you have this,
Yeah.
you're better than the other people. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. Like my
No.
number of followers does not show who I am as a person. Like
No.
you could have 1 million followers, doesn't mean you know 1 million people from there. It's just people that just found you for some reason. But with
And even like they might even not even be engaging with you. Like,
exactly. They just might
uh,
click follow and or they just want to be associated with you just for that clout.
mm.
And even clout wasn't a word back when we were younger.
Yeah.
But that just what that's how I am hearing it. And it's just that's what it's all about. Like turning against a person, just it's just so sad. And I hope kids as they're getting older or parents are listening to this, like don't encourage that for your kid because
No.
it's going to cost them when they get older, when they don't have any friends or they don't have
Mm.
anyone that's there supporting them. And it's a learning experience. I now view that now where I'm at, where you think you're friends with people back then when I was in college, but when you need them or when you graduate, you're like, okay, where are they? Like I got my
Yeah, where they're
select
gone.
few of friends that are always there, but the people that you lived with don't want anything to do with you.
Crazy, isn't it? It really is. It's sad. And yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned the high school thing. And look, I wouldn't say that that experience that I had was necessarily like the norm. I saw what you were talking about again here in Australia, similarly more so happen in high school. And it's interesting. I look at those experiences now going, wow, like I'm actually super fortunate to have been through that. I know that sounds odd, but it really impacted the way that I grew up and the person I became. Um, yeah, like through high school, I never had dramas, like that. Like all guys have run-ins with another dude at some point. Like that's just kind of natural, but never like I guess what I would call a subject to being bullied. But it also made me, I guess, become almost like somewhat of a leader in the way that I didn't stand for it either.
Mhm.
Which I think was really cool, because it enabled me that to use, I guess, my like I wasn't the most popular guy in the school in high school, but I had influence, and and I made sure that based on the experiences that I had, that no one experienced that around me, and I think. So I look at that and I see great value to that, and it was, I guess it was the beginnings of my experience and understanding of feelings and the way people like react and feel when another person does something to them. So yeah, as much as it was hugely traumatic at the time, I think because of the support that I had around me with my friends outside of school and my family and my sport, I was one of those fortunate kids who were able to take the positive out of that. Mm.
Talk about in your career path when you're getting older, did you kind of have that dream job or what was the path that you went down first before we get to where you are today?
Cool. So no, I didn't have a dream job at all, to be honest. And my years in high school, where a lot of pressure gets put on us, I'm sure it's the same over
Yeah.
there in the States, but yeah, a lot of pressure gets put on decision making. Like you've got to make the call now as to what you want to be, so you can start working towards it. And that kind of gets laid on thick at around that year 11. So around the 16 years of age kind of thing. And for me, I struggled with it for a very long time. I had no idea. I knew that I enjoyed sport. I knew that I was an extroverted person who enjoyed people. I wasn't the stupidest guy in the class. Like I was quite good at maths, not the greatest with English. So I knew I knew my strengths and my weaknesses, but I couldn't really kind of put that together into a position or a career path as such. And I don't know what it was, but one day I guess I made this connection, and I was like, you know what? I really enjoy the human body. I love training and training my physique. But I almost had more of an intrigue and interest in the way that people think. And whether that be from the fact of, the episodes of me getting bullied as a youngster or not, I wasn't sure, but I found it really intriguing to go, well, why did that person say that or think that or go down that direction when, and again, I think that also stemmed from, by this age, I was living behind a fish and chip shop that my parents owned, and I was working in that shop. So I'd go to work for my mum and dad in the morning, go to school, come back and work in the shop in the afternoon if I wasn't playing sport. And, some of my friends were working for my parents, and I would see this interaction, and I'd hear my parents complain about my friends' work ethic, and I'd hear my friends complain about my parents as bosses, and the interaction in that construct, I found it really interesting. I'm like, you guys just got to friggin' understand each other, and then it'd be harmonious. So I guess that interested me in the psychology realm. So I started to kind of go, right, I think I want to be a sports psychologist. So that was my original thought process around a career path. So I then started to look into that in high school and recognize that the grades you had to get to be able to get into the local university with I'm sure it's the same, I think Ivy League or whatever you call it over in the States, but the university that everyone wanted to go to in Queensland was called the University of Queensland, and the grades to get into that in terms of psychology were really high, like like very, very high. So early on, I was like, oh, geez, I'm not, like, this is going to be tough to get into this. I've just made the decision. I'm stoked with it. I really want to do it. And now I'm hit with my first roadblock. And I guess I talk a little bit about the story because I think it was, I don't know why I did it, but it was my first, I guess, episode or a situation in my life where I started to become almost resourceful. So I went to school and went to all my teachers and I said, this is what I want to do. And this is a grade I need to get. And a lot of them laughed at me, to be completely honest. Not in a nasty way, but they were like, Toby, come on, mate, be real. Like, because I had great relationships with my teachers and stuff, and I was like, oh, man, like I'm so set on this now. Like, and they're like, you're gonna have to think about stepping stones then, because your grades just aren't going to get you to that grade. And so I turned around and said to them, I said, is it not your job to help me get there? And they were like, oh, I've never had that conversation with a student before. And I was like, look, like, I guess my point here is that, like, I'm dedicated and I'll do anything to make that happen but I'm going to need your help. And this was like almost like after class had finished and everyone gone, I almost had like a meeting with each of my teachers. And they were like, okay, we'll see what happens. But sure enough, I worked my ass off, and they respected and delivered that back to me. And lo and behold, I actually ended up getting the grades that I needed to get into that degree, which was really cool, much to their surprise and, to be honest, mine. But in the process of applying for university, do you guys call it university, or is that called college for you guys?
It depends on the person. We call it college,
Okay.
university. It's both ways we call it.
Okay. So university here. I started again strategizing. Okay, so I'm about to go into a cohort of really intelligent people. You know, when we graduate, like I want to be able to set myself apart, and I know that I'm resourceful, but I'm not like real big studious person. So my grades aren't going to be what gets me the job over someone else. So I found another course at another university on the Gold Coast. For those of you who don't know the lay of the land, Brisbane's the capital of Queensland. Gold Coast is probably the next major city in the state. It's slightly south of where we are on the waterfront. It's a beautiful place. I make a lot of connections between that and I think Miami's on the beach, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So very, very much like that lifestyle, like, yeah, a lot of, yeah. So I was like, whoa, that's not a bad place to live. And they had a double degree of exercise science and psychological science. So I was like, okay, I could go here, I could get a double degree, which could essentially give me a bit of a leg up on those with only one. So I made that call. I moved out of home and I moved to the Gold Coast at the age of 17 to jump into that degree. So I guess that was, I think I've answered your question around where did the career start? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So that, I guess, the journey into making that decision, and then yeah, we can keep going from there. But it certainly changed to I guess ruin the ending. I'm actually not a psychologist, and I ended up changing paths.
Stop right there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on all future content. Make sure you also follow on all our social media platforms. You'll see even personalized content on there. Hopefully you enjoy. Stay tuned for more on this episode. So you talked about how you kind of went into the route of psychology, exercise, sports, kind of like you're mixing all of the passions in a way. But currently, you're basically someone listening to the beginning part mentioned Atkins Health. Where did that creation come about? Where in your career you're like, I'm ready to do this?
Yeah, cool. So I guess we fast forward to I dropped out of psychology and finished exercise science. I didn't really enjoy the way that the university taught psychology. They cared much more about like who created the theories and instead of like the application of it. And it just lost me. Like I'm much more of that practical application kind of guy. Like how can I use this information to help people? So I kind of dropped that, finished X Science, and from there, usually the trajectory was to go on and do physiotherapy. I think you guys call them physical therapists.
Yep.
All I knew is that I didn't want to do that. So at that point in time, I was like, I still now like I'm not going to be a sports psychologist now. I'm kind of almost lost again, right? So what I did was well, quite unusual. I jumped on the Kurt train of one of my friends who was moving up to northern Queensland, sorry, and worked in the mines, which is quite crazy. So quite different to Atkins Health. But I think it's important to mention that because that was almost the discovery of what my career ended up being. So I went to the mines, started literally as a laborer, probably doing the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And at university, I was a furniture removalist in to earn my money. So I was used to hard work. But this was like permanent night shifts, 12-hour shifts with a half-hour break, on a jackhammer chipping away at concrete, like for a shutdown in a mine site. It was hectic. And then I moved on and got poached by another company and then eventually ended up in what they call an operator role where I was driving around in those crazy, huge Tonka trucks, that the kids play with, in the sand pits. So that I was driving around that all day, earning some really great coins. So it was really, really good money. And that's why a lot of people do it. But what I recognized after about 18 months was that I was really kind of losing my mind. Like I was intelligence. Yeah, I really felt like I was getting stupid. Like I know that sounds weird, but like I wasn't getting intellectually challenged. The job in the mines, like they really support and because it's big on safety. Yeah, so the whole mine site is created around mistakes that shouldn't have happened, and so it kind of forces you not to think, like the roads on the mine sites are only ever one way because they didn't want to risk a head-on collision. I'm like, mate, we drove on a road to get here that was two-way. Like, if people are gonna, anyway, it's a crazy world out there. Cutting to the chase, a friend of mine stayed at university and went and did a postgraduate degree in what was called at the time a graduate diploma of exercise physiology. And I was like, what is that, mate? Like, what are you, why are you going back to uni? You're crazy. And he's like, well, at the end of this, I'm actually going to be a professional. Like, I can actually use the degree and go and be a professional and start a career. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Like, what do you do? And he's like, well, an exercise physiologist is someone who uses exercise movement to better, their health, but actually comes from a clinical angle. So, very similar to a physiotherapist or a physical therapist, whereby you're addressing conditions, rehabilitation, prehab, chronic conditions like Parkinson's disease and all this kind of thing. We're actually credited to look after that through the Medicare system, and et cetera, but we don't do hands-on treatment and we don't do diagnosis. So that's the difference between, I guess, this exercise physiology route and this physical therapist or physiotherapy route. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, that's exactly what I want to do, because the reason I didn't want to be a physical therapist was because I wasn't really into the hands-on therapy, and I didn't care so much about the diagnosis. I just wanted to help people, like fix them, and so that was, I guess, the start of Atkins Self. I applied to get into this degree. Funnily enough, I was on an American trip with a buddy of mine when I found out I got in. So yeah, he was a super smart dude and did a summer semester at Harvard. And I met him after that and traveled around the States and had an amazing time with him, going to all the different areas. And yeah, I mean, there's a whole story in that fantastic time. But after a month, I found out I got in, came back, started the degree a week later, came out with this profession, was like awesome. Like, I'm keen to get in. And again, for you guys have exercise physiology in the States, but it's definitely not as well recognized. So under the ACSM, which you guys have, do you know much about ACSM?
I do not.
Okay, so it's the American College of Sports Medicine. It's quite a huge organization in the world of I guess sport and exercise science. But there's a subsection within that in America for exercise physiology. Watch that space, because it's going to grow. And they're doing some really cool things. Funnily enough, it's nowhere like Australia's kind of leading the charge in this world and this profession. But yeah, we had a lady come over from the States. Anyway, another whole story. But at the time I graduated, which was in 2013, the opportunities for the profession weren't huge either. So I went around and looked for jobs, and because I wanted to work under an inspiring leader and get really stuck into trying to do my bit to help society with my newfound skills. And it just didn't exist. There was literally one job I liked. I applied for it, didn't even get an interview. And so at that point, I was kind of like, all right, like, what do I do? So I started Atkins Health. Funnily enough, I had no idea of what name I was going to choose. My last name is Atkins. And I was like, no one's going to see it anyway. So I'll call it Atkins Health, and I'll contract through to other people, use their name, and all's good. So that was the birth of it. That was the birth of Atkins Health, and yeah, I guess I could keep talking about where we are now. It's been an amazing journey, and we're kicking some pretty serious goals now. But that, in answer to your question, was where it all started.
What's the big mission with Atkins Health? What are you hoping to help when you're under that brand?
Yeah, nice. How long you got? No, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. So I guess our vision is through innovation to revolutionize health. So a lot of times I feel like organizations have a vision or a mission, they put it up on the wall, and that's about as far as it goes. For us, I like to brag that we're very different. And the words innovation and revolutionize are really, really important. So I can't say the vision without going deep on those two words. So the reason for innovation is if you look at the research and you look at what's going on in the world, and I know that it's the same in America as it is here in Australia, but conditions, disabilities, disorders, they're actually going they're getting worse. So a lot of focus in health, fitness, and medical have been to try and increase the mortality rate. So I guess the rate in which we die. So increase our life length. Instead of the average rate of death at 65, we're trying to push it up to 90, 95 and so on and so forth. What has been a huge problem with doing this is there hasn't been the right focus on what we call morbidity, which is, I guess, the health cycle, or the ability to actually remain healthy, active, and be a contributor to society. So what has occurred is, yes, we've increased the life cycle, the life length, but we haven't necessarily improved the person's ability to live functionally through that time. So what you see is this huge increase in percentage of population with all of these issues, because we're not targeting the actual reasons why people are actually unwell. And it's really fascinating when you go really into it. And I won't bore the audience who might not all be health nerds, but it's fascinating when you look at the top 10 killers or mortality kind of causing conditions, and I think it's like 8 out of the top 10 for men and 7 out of the top 10 for women, or something like that. It could change, it could have changed, but a large percentage are actually lifestyle conditions, things that aren't necessarily things that we can't avoid, that they're actually preventable things, right? So what you find a lot in health is a lot of the people in health are very risk adverse, right? They're very protective of their own reputation and brand, which I think is not a bad thing. But because we're also dealing with people's health, that there's a true risk, I guess, involved with doing something innovative or different. Mm-hmm. But the issue with that is we're so focused on treating things the way they've already been treated before. The progression in our actual prescription and our treatment is actually really lagging behind. So what you get is this delay from cutting edge research that occurs at universities and colleges and the likes to actually what goes on in clinical practice. So in the actual places that you go and get treated by, it's something like 17 plus years, the difference in what is getting now researched and found to be the most beneficial way of treating, and what's actually happening on the ground. So for me, this word innovation is really, really important, because technologies and all these things are going crazy in terms of their growth rate. But what a lot of this is causing is a lot of inactivity and a lot of health concerns within the population. So Atkins Health as a brand, our mission is to actually get involved to try and help this problem. So we want to get to a point where we are actually almost conducting research continuously on the fly with the way we're conducting our practices. So collecting data on how we're treating, analyzing that data and information and going, are we doing the best things, and are we actually doing good? Like, are we preventing conditions? Are we doing good rehabilitation? Are we actually getting results for clients, instead of leaving it up to guesswork or trust me, we're great at what we do? So in the process of that, our goal is to influence this this morbidity rate, this I guess lack of actually addressing these health concerns, and look to change the narrative on health. That's the innovation side. The revolution side is, by doing that, hopefully we become leaders in the field and influence others, and through that influence, we create a movement that others join us in, and therefore we can actually change the whole industry and the whole global platform. So I think that answers your question as to what we're out there. Quite ambitious, and this will take a long time. It'll be going long after I'm dead. So it's one of those things that I kind of feel like, whilst I was the founder and current owner and current CEO of Atkins Health, I see myself more as a leader of a movement currently, that I'll pass the torch down to someone else who wants to continue that.
As an owner of a company and really building a brand, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. But talking to you prior to this interview, you are a father. husband. Working all those pieces around isn't easy for someone who is creating a business because a lot of times you have to look at what is your priorities at this time. Is your business a priority at this time? Is family? And sometimes one takes a hit versus the other. How have you been able to kind of work around those different areas of being there as a husband, being there as a father, but being there for clients or people you work with, employees, and making it work? Or has it been a challenge and you had to really work hard to make it all balance?
Yeah, Alex, it's a huge challenge. And I can't, if the word was up on screen, I would bold, italicize, underline that word huge. It's super tough, and I'm a bit crazy, and I don't only own Atkins Health. I actually own another company called the Business Operating System, or for short, the Boss, which is a whole software company as well. And it's shareholders in a gym brand. Have I taken on maybe too many roles for one person? Possibly. Is that part of who I am? Absolutely. So to talk to all those different roles, mate, it is incredibly difficult. And to be honest with you, I'm still trying to work it out. I haven't completely conquered that challenge yet. It is one I'm fighting to conquer. I'm definitely better. So my son was born on the 28th of June last year. So we're nearly 11 months now. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm certainly a lot further along than what I was 11 months ago. Um, Look, it requires a lot of patience for yourself. To be honest, a lot of self-efficacy, because what happens when these big, life-changing events occur is it's a life-changing event for your support system as well as it is for you, right?
Yeah.
If I talk to my wife, she was a highly strong, independent woman, very ambitious from a career perspective as well. And we talk about the changes to me. She's got 10 times the change to her life, than I had to mine. And so where we kind of had worked out how we could support one another in our ambitious, goals before our son was born, uh, our son being born has completely changed that dynamic. And it's hard. It's really hard, because not only are you taking on another role, being a father, but yeah, like I said, it changes the dynamic of a relationship. It adds roles to them. Support systems change. Expectations of you change due to their experiences. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm making it sound all bad. My son is just amazing. I absolutely love him to death. Probably too much, mate. I'm probably too affectionate of a bloke to my little man. He's like, it's funny. It almost sometimes seems like a teenager already. Where he's like, "Stop kissing me, dad. Like, leave me alone." Like, kind of thing already. So it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But yeah, it's challenging, mate. Like, I guess the biggest advice or the biggest things that I think has worked for me so far is communication, being really open and honest, and having the tough conversations are usually the ones that need to happen the most.
Yeah.
Trying to have those conversations as often as possible with in this case my team at work, and also my team at home, being my wife. Unfortunately, the little man can't understand me yet, so there's no use necessarily talking to him. But yeah, that's I guess the biggest thing that's what I've tried to really double down on. And I guess it's that kind of working out having that conversation around the expectations, and like, all right, well, I am an owner and founder of multiple businesses, and you knew that, when you married me, and we knew that when we were going to have a child, and we knew this wasn't going to be easy. So, this is part of who I am. I can't change that, because then I won't be the guy, that our son needs, and that my wife loves and married. So I can't change who I am, and I don't think that anybody would like that. But how do I work in my hours of my day, and what sacrifices do I need to make in terms of the usage of my time to best prioritize it? So I don't know if I've completely answered the question as to how I've overcome that challenge, but I guess it's because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well, this final question will kind of go into when your son gets older and he listens to this interview. But the final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
The best answer I have ever found to that is an unusual one, which is listen. I think as a society, we get taught through education to be good speakers. I'm sure you would have experienced in the same over in the States. In English, you get taught to deliver oral presentations, and
Yep.
all of these aspects of in life, public speaking courses, and like all of this construct around society is about becoming a better speaker. But there's a huge lack of education and emphasis being put on how to be a good listener. And I guess the success that I've achieved to date, even if you go back and you listen to the podcasts that we've just had and the conversations we've just had, a lot of it had come from me listening to my father, me listening to the conversations of even the bullies that were having with me, trying to work out like why it is they were bullying me. And then when it worked out, there was nothing that I was actually doing. I was like, well, this is silly. Let's address it. To my friends, and all of the my teachers, them telling me that I can't do it, and then understanding and listening and understanding the origin of what a teacher is there for. So all these things, I guess, come back to being curious, and actually genuinely wanting to listen to others, because I think it would be very egotistical and arrogant for us to think that whatever it is that we want to achieve in life, someone else hasn't already done.
Hmm.
And so my whole thing is like, we're only here actually for a short amount of time, right? On
Yep.
this planet. And if we're wanting to achieve greatness, we really actually don't have a lot of time to do that. So we've got to learn the shortcuts. And I think a lot of people talk about failure, and I think it's very common knowledge and conversations around like you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. Yeah, and I'm a massive believer of that. A huge believer of that. But I also look at myself and my age and what I want to achieve, and I also go, wow, like, geez, I've got to fail a lot to get there. Like I've got a lot of learning to do to get to where I want to get to. And if I fail as much as I think I need to get to that, to be able to give as much value as I need to be able to get to where I need to get to, I think I'm going to run out of time, Alex. So the only way I think I'm going to be able to get there is to actually learn from other people's failures. And so for me, it's about finding those people who have walked the journey that I really want to, or even part of that journey, and actually just listening to them. And hopefully, I can get maybe half of the learnings they did by being the one who actually failed. So I can shortcut, and potentially avoid, or at least avoid the extremity of the same type of failure. So yeah, I guess my advice would be curious and listen.
Tobias, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate having me on the show, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure and really enjoyable.
Stop right there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on all future content. Make sure you also follow on all our social media platforms. You'll see even personalized content on there. Hopefully you enjoy. Stay tuned for more on this episode.